Well, it's been called America's Main Street. The legendary Route 66 stretches from Chicago to the Santa Monica Pier. The roadway has defined generations of travelers and inspired countless stories. And now we're hitting the road to celebrate a century of Route 66.
NBC.
Of course, all of us know the reputation Central Avenue and the International District have here at Albuquerque, filled with drugs, problem motels, and unwanted crime, creating safety concerns for basically everybody. That is exactly why Bernalillo County District Attorney Sam Brigman collaborated with multiple agencies to lead Operation Route 66. The goal.
New at 6 with less than 30 days to go, Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell is kicking off the countdown to what he calls the biggest party on Route 66 this year.
Fox 23's newest reporter, Paige Orr, has the details.
Before highways had numbers, they had names. And none of those names burned brighter or reached farther than the one that became Route 66. It wasn't just a road, it was a promise. A 2,448-mile ribbon of concrete and asphalt that stretched from the shores of Lake Michigan to the beaches of the Pacific Ocean, connecting 8 states and 3 time zones with a single unbroken line of possibility. From Chicago to Los Angeles, it promised Americans they could climb into a car and drive themselves into a new life, a new beginning, a new version of the American dream. If you've ever driven cross-country, you've probably followed part of its path. You see it on signs, maybe even traveled stretches still marked as Historic Route 66. But do you know its history? Today, we're telling the origin story of Route 66, how it was imagined, how it was built, and how it changed not just America's highways, but America itself. Come with me as we go beyond the exit. Chapter 1. Before the Mother Road. In 1920, traveling from Chicago to Los Angeles was an adventure that few Americans dared to attempt. There was no direct route west. The roads that existed were a patchwork of local highways, farm roads, and wagon trails, many of them impassable in bad weather. If you wanted to drive cross-country, you needed more than a car. You needed courage, preparation, and a healthy dose of luck. Journalist Emily Post, better known for her etiquette guides, attempted the journey in 1915 and wrote about the experience with characteristic precision. From Chicago, she had to drive north to Wisconsin, then west through Minnesota and the Dakotas before turning south through Colorado and New Mexico. The direct route added hundreds of miles and took her through some of the most desolate country in America. Even the shorter routes were treacherous. The National Old Trails Road, which roughly followed the path that would later become Route 66, was more aspiration than reality. Stretches of it were well maintained near major cities, but between towns it often disappeared entirely into rutted dirt tracks that turned to impassable mud when it rained. And it's important to remember what America looked like in those days before Route 66. In 1920, the automobile was still competing with the railroad for long-distance travel. Henry Ford's Model T had put cars within reach of middle-class families, but most people still thought of automobiles as local transportation. A cross-country drive wasn't just difficult, it was almost unthinkable for ordinary Americans. Out in the countryside, especially in the Southwest, the infrastructure simply didn't exist to support automobile travel. Gas stations were few and far between. Repair shops were non-existent in many areas. Hotels that catered to motorists were rare. If your car broke down in the middle of the Arizona desert, you might wait days for help to arrive. The roads themselves were a study in chaos and inconsistency. Each state, each county, sometimes each town, had its own ideas about how roads should be built and maintained. There were no uniform standards for construction, no consistent signage, no coordinated planning. A highway that was smooth concrete in Illinois might become gravel in Missouri and dirt in Kansas. Navigation was a nightmare. Maps were unreliable when they existed at all. Road signs were haphazard and often contradictory. Travelers relied on local knowledge, word of mouth, and sometimes pure guesswork to find their way. Getting lost wasn't just inconvenient, it could be dangerous or even fatal in the vast empty spaces of the American West. Yet people understood what was at stake. They saw the potential of the automobile to transform American life, to connect isolated communities with the broader world, to open up opportunities that had never existed before. Small towns along potential highway routes knew that being bypassed by a major road could mean economic death, while being included could mean prosperity and growth. The vision was there, waiting to be realized. All it needed was someone with the political skill and relentless determination to make it happen. And that's where Cyrus Avery enters the story. Chapter 2. The father of Route 66. Cyrus Stevens. Avery didn't look like a revolutionary. A quiet, methodical businessman from Tulsa, Oklahoma, he made his living in oil, real estate, and coal mining. But Avery had a vision that would reshape America, a continuous, well-maintained highway that would connect the industrial heartland with the growing cities of the West. By 1920, Avery had already made his mark in Oklahoma politics and business. He'd served in the state legislature, where he'd championed good roads legislation. He'd seen firsthand how improved transportation could transform rural communities, bringing them access to markets, medical care, and opportunities that had previously been out of reach. But Avery's vision went beyond state boundaries. He understood that America's future depended on connecting its regions, on creating a transportation network that would allow goods, people, and ideas to flow freely across the continent. The railroad had done this in the 19th century, but the automobile offered something the railroad couldn't: individual freedom and flexibility. Avery wasn't alone in his vision. Across the country, other men were pushing for better roads and coordinated highway planning. But Avery had something many of them lacked: a deep understanding of both the technical challenges of road building and the political realities of getting things done in a federal system where states jealously guarded their prerogatives. The opportunity came in 1925 when Congress passed the Federal Aid Highway Act, creating the numbered U.S. highway system. For the first time, there would be national standards for highway construction and a coordinated numbering system that would make navigation easier for travelers. The American Association of State Highway Officials, AASHO, was tasked with planning the system and assigning the numbers. Avery saw his chance. As Oklahoma's representative to AASHO and chairman of its route numbering committee, he was in a perfect position to influence the new system. But he faced fierce competition from other states and regions, each pushing for routes that would benefit their own interests. The politics were brutal. Every proposed highway route meant winners and losers, communities that would prosper from increased traffic, and others that would be bypassed and forgotten. State delegations lobbied furiously for routes that would serve their major cities. Regional alliances formed and dissolved as different interests competed for limited federal funding. Avery's masterstroke was to propose a route that would serve not just one region, but multiple regions with different but complementary interests. His proposed highway would start in Chicago, the industrial and transportation hub of the Midwest. It would run southwest through Missouri and Oklahoma, serving agricultural areas that needed better access to markets. It would continue through Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, connecting isolated communities with the broader economy. And it would end in Los Angeles, the booming metropolis that was becoming the economic engine of the West Coast. The route was brilliant politics. It connected major population centers while also serving rural areas. It linked established industrial regions with emerging markets. It promised benefits to farmers, manufacturers, tourists, and businesses. Most importantly, it created a coalition of interests that could support the project through the inevitable political battles ahead. But Avery's proposal faced one major obstacle: the number. In the new federal numbering system, major east-west routes were supposed to end in 0. The most prestigious number, Route 60, was already claimed by a proposed highway from Virginia to California that would run through Kentucky, Missouri, and the Southwest. The battle over Route 60 became one of the most contentious fights in the early history of the federal highway system. Kentucky's delegation, led by powerful politicians with strong ties to the railroad industry, argued that their route was more direct and would serve more people. Avery countered that his route would open up underdeveloped regions and create new economic opportunities. The fight dragged on for months, with both sides marshaling political support and technical arguments. Maps were drawn and redrawn, traffic projections were calculated and disputed. Political favors were called in and new alliances formed. In the end, Avery lost the battle, but won the war. The Kentucky route kept the Route 60 designation, but Avery's highway got something better. Route 66, a number that would become more famous than any other highway designation in American history. Chapter 3. The Politics of Pavement. Getting Route 66 designated was just the beginning. Now came the harder task, actually building the road. In 1926, when Route 66 was officially established, much of the route existed only on paper. Some sections were well-paved highways near major cities. Others were gravel roads suitable for local traffic. Still others were little more than dirt tracks that became impassable in bad weather. The challenge was enormous. Route 66 would cross 8 states, each with its own highway department, its own construction standards, and its own budget constraints. It would traverse every type of terrain America had to offer: the flat prairies of Illinois, the rolling hills of Missouri, the oil fields of Oklahoma, the cattle ranches of Texas, the high desert of New Mexico, the mountains and deserts of Arizona, and the valleys and mountains of California. Cyrus Avery understood that coordination would be the key to success. In 1927, he helped organize the U.S. Highway 66 Association, a coalition of business leaders, politicians, and highway officials from all 8 states along the route. The association's mission was simple but ambitious: to promote the construction and improvement of Route 66 and to market it as America's premier cross-country highway. The association's first major campaign was brilliantly conceived. Instead of focusing on the technical details of highway construction, they sold Route 66 as a story, the story of America itself. They called it the Main Street of America, connecting the heartland with the frontier. They promoted it as the Will Rogers Highway, honoring the beloved Oklahoma humorist who embodied the spirit of the American West. But the association's most successful marketing campaign was also its most audacious. In 1928, they sponsored a foot race from Los Angeles to Chicago, a publicity stunt that captured national attention and put Route 66 on the front pages of newspapers across the country. The Bunyan Derby, as it was nicknamed, took 84 days to complete and generated millions of dollars worth of free publicity for the highway. The publicity helped, but it couldn't solve the fundamental problem: money. Building a modern highway across 2,400 miles of diverse terrain would cost tens of millions of dollars, far more than the federal government was prepared to spend on a single project. The states along the route would have to provide matching funds, but many of them were struggling financially and couldn't afford major highway projects. Avery and the Highway 66 Association developed an innovative solution. They would build the road in sections, focusing first on the segments that would generate the most traffic and economic benefit. Urban areas and major river crossings got priority since these were the bottlenecks that most limited travel. Rural sections could be improved gradually as traffic increased and funding became available. The strategy worked, but it created its own problems. By 1930, Route 66 was a patchwork of different road surfaces and construction standards. Travelers might encounter smooth concrete pavement in one state and rutted gravel in the next. Some sections had modern bridges and overpasses, while others still used dangerous at-grade railroad crossings. The inconsistency was frustrating for travelers and embarrassing for the states involved. But it also created a sense of adventure and unpredictability that became part of Route 66's mystique. Driving the highway wasn't just transportation, it was an experience, a test of both man and machine against the challenges of the American landscape. The Great Depression, which began in 1929, initially threatened to derail Route 66's development. State budgets were slashed and highway construction projects were canceled or postponed indefinitely. But the Depression also created new opportunities for federal involvement in highway construction. President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal programs, particularly the Works Progress Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps, provided federal funding and workers for highway projects. Route 66 became a priority for these programs because it served multiple purposes. It provided jobs for unemployed workers, it connected agricultural areas with markets, and it facilitated the movement of people and goods across the country. The federal investment transformed Route 66 from a collection of local roads into a true transcontinental highway. By 1937, the entire route was paved, making it the first completely paved cross-country highway in America. The achievement was celebrated with ceremonies in all 8 states and extensive coverage in national media. But even as Route 66 was being completed, it was already beginning to change American culture in ways that its creators had never anticipated. Chapter 4: The Birth of Roadside America. Route 66 didn't just connect cities, it created an entirely new landscape between them. As traffic increased along the highway, entrepreneurs recognized opportunities to serve the growing number of motorists. Gas stations, restaurants, motels, and tourist attractions sprouted along the route, creating what would become known as roadside America. This wasn't planned development. There were no zoning laws or design standards governing what could be built along the highway. Businesses competed for attention with increasingly elaborate signs, unusual architecture, and outrageous gimmicks. The result was a chaotic but vibrant commercial landscape unlike anything America had ever seen. Gas stations were among the first businesses to recognize the potential of highway traffic. In the early days of Route 66, gas stations were simple affairs: a pump, a small building, maybe a mechanic's bay. But as competition intensified, station owners began adding services and amenities. They offered free air and water, clean restrooms, and friendly service. Some added restaurants or gift shops. Others created elaborate themed designs that would catch the eye of passing motorists. The Phillips Petroleum Company, based in Oklahoma, became synonymous with Route 66 through its aggressive expansion along the highway. Phillips 66 stations, with their distinctive orange and black signs, became landmarks for travelers. The company's advertising campaigns promoted both their gasoline and the highway itself, helping to establish Route 66's reputation as America's premier driving route. Restaurants along Route 66 had to solve a unique problem: how to serve customers who were in a hurry and might never return. The solution was fast, simple food that could be prepared quickly and eaten on the go. This led to innovations that would eventually transform American dining: drive-in restaurants, standardized menus, and the beginnings of what would become the fast food industry. Some Route 66 restaurants became destinations in themselves. The Big Texan Steak Ranch in Amarillo, Texas, offered a free 72-ounce steak to anyone who could eat it in an hour. Merrimack Caverns in Missouri combined a natural attraction with aggressive roadside advertising, posting signs for hundreds of miles in each direction. These businesses understood that on Route 66, entertainment was as important as service. Motels were perhaps the most significant innovation of the Route 66 era. Before the highway, travelers stayed in downtown hotels that were often expensive and inconvenient for motorists. The motel, a combination of motor and hotel, was designed specifically for automobile travelers. Rooms opened directly onto parking areas, making it easy to unload luggage and keep an eye on your car. The first motels were simple affairs, a row of small cabins with basic amenities. But as competition increased, motel owners began adding features that would attract customers. Swimming pools became standard. Air conditioning was a major selling point in the hot Southwest. Some motels adopted elaborate themes: Western motels with teepee-shaped rooms, space-age motels with futuristic designs, luxury motels that rivaled the finest hotels. The motel industry also pioneered many of the marketing techniques that would later be adopted by other businesses. Neon signs became increasingly elaborate. turning the highway into a river of colored light at night. Roadside advertising reached new levels of creativity and audacity. Burma shave signs, with their clever rhyming messages spread across multiple signs, became a beloved feature of highway travel. But Route 66's most lasting contribution to American culture was the idea of the road trip itself. Before the highway, long-distance automobile travel was seen as a necessity or an adventure for the wealthy. Route 66 made it accessible to ordinary Americans and transformed it into a form of recreation and self-discovery. The highway created its own mythology and folklore. Songs were written about it, movies featured it. Writers and artists found inspiration in its landscapes and characters. Route 66 became more than just a road. It became a symbol of American freedom, mobility, and opportunity. This cultural significance would prove crucial during the most challenging period in Route 66's history, the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl migration that would earn it the nickname the Mother Road. Chapter 5. The Mother Road. The 1930s transformed Route 66 from a highway into a lifeline. As the Great Depression deepened and the Dust Bowl devastated the agricultural heartland, hundreds of thousands of Americans took to the road in search of work, hope, and a new beginning. Route 66 became their path to salvation, or so they hoped. The Dust Bowl was an ecological disaster of unprecedented scale. Years of drought, combined with poor farming practices, had turned millions of acres of farmland into a wasteland of blowing dust. Crops failed, livestock died, and families who had worked the same land for generations found themselves with no choice but to abandon everything and head west. John Steinbeck captured this migration in his novel, The Grapes of Wrath, published in 1939. Steinbeck called Route 66 the Mother Road, the Road of Flight, and his description of the Joad family's journey from Oklahoma to California became the defining image of the highway during the Depression era. The book won the Pulitzer Prize and was adapted into an Academy Award-winning film, cementing Route 66's place in American literature and popular culture. But the reality of the migration was often harsher than Steinbeck's fiction. The Okies, as the migrants were called, regardless of which state they actually came from, traveled in overloaded cars and trucks, carrying everything they owned. Many had little money and no guarantee of work when they reached California. Breakdowns were common, and families often found themselves stranded along the highway with no resources and nowhere to turn. The migration put enormous strain on the communities along Route 66. Small towns that had welcomed tourists found themselves overwhelmed by desperate families seeking food, shelter, and assistance. Some communities responded with compassion, setting up camps and providing aid. Others, fearing that the migrants would become a permanent burden, tried to discourage them from stopping. California, the destination for most of the migrants, was particularly hostile. State officials set up checkpoints at the border, turning away families who couldn't prove they had jobs waiting. Local authorities in agricultural areas often treated the migrants as criminals, arresting them for vagrancy or other minor offenses. The promised land of California often proved to be anything but welcoming. Yet Route 66 continued to serve as a symbol of hope and possibility. Even families who faced hardship and discrimination along the way clung to the belief that the highway would eventually lead them to a better life. For many, it did. The migrants who reached California often found work in the state's growing agricultural and defense industries. Their children grew up to become part of California's post-war boom. The migration also changed Route 66 itself. Businesses along the highway learned to serve a new type of customer, families with little money but great need. Cheap motels and diners proliferated. Gas stations offered credit and payment plans. Some entrepreneurs made fortunes selling used cars and parts to migrants whose vehicles had broken down along the way. The federal government also took notice of Route 66's role in the migration. New Deal programs provided funding for highway improvements and the construction of migrant camps. The Works Progress Administration employed thousands of workers to upgrade the highway, creating jobs while improving the infrastructure that was carrying so many Americans to new lives. World War II brought new challenges and opportunities to Route 66. The highway became a crucial military transportation route, carrying troops, equipment, and supplies to training bases and defense plants across the Southwest. The war also brought prosperity to many communities along the route, as defense spending created jobs and stimulated economic growth. But the war also revealed Route 66's limitations. The highway that had seemed so modern and efficient in the 1930s was struggling to handle the increased traffic of the 1940s. Bottlenecks in cities caused massive delays. The two-lane road was inadequate for heavy military traffic. It became clear that America would need a new generation of highways to meet the demands of the post-war era. The seeds of Route 66's eventual decline were planted during the war years, even as the highway was experiencing its greatest importance. Military planners, frustrated by traffic delays and bottlenecks, began advocating for a new type of highway, limited access roads that could handle high-speed traffic without the interruptions of traffic lights, railroad crossings, and roadside businesses. But in 1945, as America celebrated victory and looked forward to peacetime prosperity, Route 66 seemed more important than ever. The highway that had carried migrants west during the Depression and military traffic during the war was about to enter its golden age, the era that would make it an icon of American popular culture. Chapter 6: The Golden Age. The post-war boom transformed Route 66 into something its creators had never imagined: America's playground. Prosperity, leisure time, and the automobile culture combined to create a new phenomenon: the family vacation road trip. Route 66, with its promise of adventure and its roadside attractions, became the ultimate destination for Americans eager to explore their country. The numbers tell the story. In 1946, an estimated 200,000 vehicles traveled the complete length of Route 66. By 1950, that number had doubled. By 1955, it had doubled again. The highway that had been built to handle local traffic and commercial transportation was now carrying millions of tourists, vacationers, and adventure seekers. This explosion in traffic created unprecedented opportunities for businesses along the route. The simple gas stations and motor courts of the 1930s evolved into elaborate enterprises designed to capture the attention and dollars of passing motorists. Competition was fierce, and entrepreneurs competed with increasingly outrageous attractions and amenities. Neon signs reached new heights of creativity and excess. The Desert Hills Motel in Tulsa featured a 100-foot-tall neon sign that could be seen for miles. The Munger Moss Motel in Missouri installed a sign with over 1,000 light bulbs. These weren't just advertisements, they were works of art that transformed the highway into a river of colored light after dark. Architecture became increasingly theatrical. The Wigwam Motel chain featured rooms shaped like concrete teepees. The Cozy Dog Drive-In in Springfield, Illinois, was shaped like a hot dog. The Bottle Tree Ranch in California displayed thousands of colorful glass bottles on metal trees, creating a surreal forest of recycled art. Food became part of the entertainment. Drive-in restaurants proliferated, offering everything from traditional American fare to exotic regional specialties. The Pig Hip restaurant in Broadwell, Illinois, became famous for its pork tenderloin sandwiches. Lucille's Roadhouse in Oklahoma served chicken dinners that drew customers from hundreds of miles away. These establishments weren't just feeding travelers, they were creating experiences and memories. The motel industry reached new levels of sophistication and luxury. The Best Western chain, founded by M.K. Gurton in 1946, began as a referral system for quality motels along Western highways, with Route 66 properties forming the core of the network. Holiday Inn, founded by Kemmons Wilson in 1952, revolutionized the industry with standardized rooms, consistent quality, and family-friendly amenities like swimming pools and restaurants. But Route 66's golden age wasn't just about commerce, it was about culture. The highway became a symbol of American freedom and mobility, celebrated in songs, movies, and literature. Nat King Cole's 1946 recording of Get Your Kicks On Route 66 became a jazz standard and introduced the highway to audiences around the world. The song's lyrics, "It winds from Chicago to LA, more than 2,000 miles all the way," became as familiar to Americans as the Pledge of Allegiance. Television discovered Route 66 in 1960 with the CBS series of the same name. The show, starring Martin Milner and George Maharis as two young men traveling the highway in a Chevrolet Corvette, ran for 4 seasons and brought the romance and adventure of Route 66 into American living rooms. Though much of the series was actually filmed in other locations, it cemented the highway's reputation as a place where anything could happen and dreams could come true. The automobile industry embraced Route 66 as the perfect showcase for American cars. Chevrolet, Ford, and other manufacturers used the highway in their advertising, promoting both their vehicles and the freedom of the open road. The Corvette, introduced in 1953, became particularly associated with Route 66, representing the pinnacle of American automotive design and performance. But even as Route 66 was reaching the height of its cultural influence, forces were already at work that would lead to its decline. The Interstate Highway System, authorized by Congress in 1956, promised to create a new generation of limited-access highways that would make cross-country travel faster and more efficient than ever before. The interstate system was sold to Congress and the public as a matter of national defense. High-speed highways that could facilitate the rapid movement of military personnel and equipment in case of nuclear attack. But everyone understood that the real beneficiaries would be civilian travelers and commercial traffic. The interstates would bypass the congested downtowns and commercial strips that slowed traffic on highways like Route 66. Initially, many Route 66 boosters welcomed the interstate system. They assumed that the new highways would complement rather than replace the existing routes, handling through traffic while leaving local and tourist traffic to the traditional highways. Some even hoped that Route 66 would be upgraded to interstate standards, preserving its route while improving its capacity and safety. But the engineers and planners designing the interstate system had different ideas. They were focused on efficiency, not history or sentiment. The new highways would follow the straightest, flattest routes possible, regardless of which communities they served or bypassed. Speed and safety were the priorities, not scenic beauty or roadside attractions. The first section of interstate to directly compete with Route 66 opened in 1957, a stretch of I-44 in Missouri that bypassed several small towns along the old highway. The impact was immediate and devastating. Traffic on the bypass sections of Route 66 dropped by 75% almost overnight. Businesses that had thrived for decades suddenly found themselves without customers. The pattern would be repeated hundreds of times over the next 2 decades as the interstate system gradually replaced Route 66. Each new section of interstate highway meant economic death for the communities it bypassed. Gas stations closed, restaurants failed, motels stood empty. The vibrant roadside culture that had made Route 66 famous began to disappear. But the highway's decline wasn't immediate or uniform. Some sections remained busy for years after parallel interstates opened, particularly in areas where the interstate route differed significantly from the old highway. Tourist traffic continued to support some businesses, especially those that had become destinations in their own right. The final blow came in 1984, when the last section of Route 66 was bypassed by Interstate 40 near Williams, Arizona. For the first time since 1926, it was possible to drive from Chicago to Los Angeles without ever setting foot on Route 66. The highway that had once been America's Main Street was now officially obsolete. Chapter 7: The Decline and Fall. The death of Route 66 wasn't sudden. It was a slow strangulation that took nearly 3 decades to complete. As each section of the interstate highway system opened, another piece of the old highway withered and died. The process was as predictable as it was heartbreaking for the communities that had built their lives around the famous road. The first casualties were the smallest towns, places like Glen Rio, Texas, and Amboy, California, that existed primarily to serve highway travelers. When the interstates bypassed these communities, they lost their entire economic base almost overnight. Gas stations that had pumped thousands of gallons per day suddenly served only a handful of local customers. Restaurants that had been packed with travelers found themselves empty, except for the occasional nostalgic tourist. Larger communities fared better initially, but even they felt the impact. Cities like Flagstaff, Arizona, and Gallup, New Mexico, had diversified economies that didn't depend entirely on highway traffic. But the loss of Route 66 still meant the closure of dozens of businesses and the loss of hundreds of jobs. Downtown areas that had bustled with activity became ghost towns as travelers sped past on the new interstates. The human cost was enormous. Families that had operated roadside businesses for generations found themselves bankrupt. Workers who had spent their careers in the tourism industry were forced to find new occupations or relocate to other areas. Entire communities saw their young people leave for opportunities elsewhere, leaving behind aging populations and declining tax bases. Some business owners tried to adapt to the new reality. They relocated their operations to interstate exits, hoping to capture some of the traffic that now bypassed their communities. But the interstate environment was different from the old highway. Travelers on the interstates were focused on speed and efficiency, not on the unique experiences and personal service that had characterized Route 66 businesses. The new interstate-oriented businesses were also different. Instead of the family-owned operations that had dominated Route 66, the interstates attracted chain restaurants, franchise motels, and corporate gas stations. These businesses offered standardized service and familiar brands, but they lacked the personality and local character that had made Route 66 special. The physical infrastructure of Route 66 began to deteriorate as traffic declined. State highway departments, facing budget constraints and competing priorities, reduced maintenance on sections of the old highway that carried little traffic. Pavement cracked and crumbled, bridges were allowed to deteriorate, signs were removed or left to fade and rust. Some sections of Route 66 were actually abandoned entirely. In remote areas where the interstate followed a completely different route, the old highway was simply closed and left to return to nature. Weeds grew through the pavement, sand drifted across the roadway. What had once been America's Main Street became a series of ghost roads leading nowhere. The cultural impact was just as significant as the economic impact. Route 66 had been more than just a highway. It had been a symbol of American freedom, mobility, and opportunity. Its decline seemed to represent the end of an era, the loss of something uniquely American in favor of efficiency and standardization. Writers and journalists began to document the highway's decline, creating a literature of loss and nostalgia. Books like Route 66, The Mother Road by Michael Wallace and Ghost Towns of Route 66 by Jim Hinckley captured both the glory days of the highway and the melancholy of its abandonment. These works helped to preserve the memory of Route 66 and began to build the case for its preservation and restoration. Photographers also played a crucial role in documenting the highway's decline. Artists like John Margolis and Shelley Graham traveled the length of Route 66, photographing the abandoned gas stations, crumbling motels, and fading signs that marked the highway's passage. Their work created a visual record of a disappearing America and helped to raise awareness of what was being lost. By the late 1970s, it was clear that Route 66 as a functioning highway was doomed. The interstate highway system was nearly complete, and the old road carried only a fraction of its former traffic. Many sections had been decommissioned entirely, their route numbers removed from official maps. The highway that had once connected America was being erased from the American landscape. But even as Route 66 was dying as a transportation route, it was being reborn as something else. A symbol, a memory, and eventually a tourist destination in its own right. The very obsolescence that had killed the highway as a practical route would eventually become the source of its resurrection as a cultural icon. The final official act came in 1985 when the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials voted to remove Route 66 from the U.S. highway system. The highway that had been designated US 66 in 1926 officially ceased to exist as a federal route. After 59 years, the Mother Road was dead. Or so it seemed. Chapter 8. The Preservation Movement. The death of Route 66. As an official highway sparked something unexpected, a grassroots movement to preserve and celebrate what remained of America's most famous road. The movement began with individuals who had personal connections to the highway, former business owners, longtime residents of Route 66 communities, and travelers who had fond memories of the road's golden age. One of the earliest and most influential preservationists was Angel Delgadillo, a barber in Seligman, Arizona. When Interstate 40 bypassed his town in 1978, Delgadillo watched his community begin to die. Instead of accepting defeat, he began organizing efforts to promote Seligman and other bypassed communities as tourist destinations. He founded the historic Route 66 Association of Arizona in 1987 and became one of the most visible advocates for Route 66 preservation. Delgadillo's approach was simple but effective. He argued that Route 66's historical and cultural significance made it worth preserving, even if it was no longer needed as a transportation route. He organized car shows, promoted Route 66 festivals, and worked with other preservationists to create a network of attractions and services for tourists interested in experiencing the old highway. The preservation movement gained momentum throughout the 1980s and 1990s as baby boomers who had grown up during Route 66's golden age began to have the time and money to pursue nostalgic travel. These tourists weren't interested in the fastest route from Chicago to Los Angeles. They wanted to experience the America they remembered from their youth, or the America they had seen in movies and television shows. State governments began to recognize the tourism potential of Route 66. In 1990, Missouri became the first state to designate its section of the old highway as Historic Route 66, installing new signs and promoting the route as a tourist attraction. Other states quickly followed suit, creating a patchwork of historic designations that covered most of the original route. The federal government also took notice. In 1999, Congress passed the Route 66 Corridor Preservation Program, which provided federal funding for the preservation and interpretation of historic sites along the highway. The program recognized Route 66 as a nationally significant cultural resource and committed federal resources to its preservation. But the preservation movement faced significant challenges. Much of the original Route 66 infrastructure had been demolished or had deteriorated beyond repair. Many of the iconic businesses and attractions that had made the highway famous were gone forever. The preservationists were often trying to recreate something that existed more in memory and imagination than in physical reality. The solution was to focus on what remained and to interpret what was lost. Museums were established in communities along the route to tell the story of Route 66 and its impact on American culture. Historic buildings were restored and converted into visitor centers and gift shops. New businesses were created to serve Route 66 tourists, often in buildings that mimicked the architectural styles of the highway's golden age. The preservation movement also embraced the power of storytelling. Instead of simply preserving buildings and artifacts, preservationists worked to capture and share the human stories of Route 66, the families who had operated roadside businesses, the travelers who had found adventure and opportunity along the highway, the communities that had been transformed by their connection to the famous road. This approach proved remarkably successful. By the early 2000s, Route 66 tourism was generating hundreds of millions of dollars in economic activity for communities along the route. Hotels, restaurants, and attractions that catered to Route 66 tourists were thriving. The highway that had been declared dead was very much alive again, albeit in a very different form than its creators had ever imagined. The preservation movement also went international. Route 66 had always had fans overseas, particularly in Europe and Japan, where American car culture and rock and roll music had created a fascination with the highway. International tourists began making pilgrimages to drive Route 66, often spending weeks following the old route and visiting the preserved attractions and museums. This international interest added another dimension to Route 66's resurrection. The highway became not just an American icon, but a global symbol of freedom, adventure, and the open road. Tour companies in Europe and Asia began offering Route 66 packages, complete with rental cars, hotel reservations, and guided tours of historic sites. The success of the preservation movement also inspired similar efforts for other historic highways. The Lincoln Highway, the Dixie Highway, and dozens of other early auto routes began to receive attention from preservationists and tourists. Route 66 had shown that obsolete highways could have a second life as cultural attractions and tourist destinations. But the preservation movement also raised difficult questions about authenticity and commercialization. How much of the historic Route 66 experience was genuine history, and how much was manufactured nostalgia? Were the new businesses and attractions that catered to Route 66 tourists preserving the highway's legacy or exploiting it? These questions became more pressing as Route 66 tourism continued to grow and evolve in the 21st century. Chapter 9: The Digital Age and Global Icon. The arrival of the Internet and digital technology in the 1990s and 2000s transformed Route 66 from a regional tourist attraction into a global phenomenon. Suddenly, anyone with a computer could research the highway's history, plan a Route 66 road trip, and connect with other enthusiasts around the world. Websites, forums, and social media groups created virtual communities of Route 66 fans who shared information, photos, and stories. Digital photography and GPS technology made it easier than ever to document and navigate the old highway. Travelers could use GPS coordinates to find abandoned sections of the original route that weren't marked on modern maps. Digital cameras allowed them to capture and share images of the highway's remaining attractions and ruins. Online photo galleries and travel blogs created a vast archive of Route 66 imagery and experiences. The digital revolution also enabled new forms of Route 66 scholarship and preservation. Historians could access digitized archives and documents that had previously been available only to researchers with physical access to specific libraries and collections. Crowdsourced projects collected oral histories, photographs, and artifacts from people with connections to the highway. Online databases cataloged the locations and histories of Route 66 businesses and attractions. But the digital age also brought new challenges. GPS navigation systems, programmed to find the fastest route between 2 points, often directed travelers away from the historic Route 66 alignment and onto the parallel interstates. Travelers who wanted to follow the old highway had to make a conscious effort to ignore their GPS and follow printed maps or specialized Route 66 navigation apps. The proliferation of online information also led to overcrowding at some Route 66 attractions. Social media posts about hidden gems or photogenic locations could generate hundreds of visitors within days, overwhelming small businesses and fragile historic sites. The Cadillac Ranch in Texas, where 10 Cadillacs are buried nose down in a wheat field, became so popular that the surrounding area was often packed with tour buses and rental cars. The global reach of digital media also internationalized Route 66 in unprecedented ways. The highway appeared in movies, television shows, and advertisements produced around the world. Japanese car companies used Route 66 imagery to sell vehicles in Asia. European fashion brands used the highway as a backdrop for advertising campaigns. The road that had once connected Chicago to Los Angeles now connected the entire world to an idealized vision of American freedom and adventure. This global popularity brought both benefits and challenges to Route 66 communities. International tourists provided a significant economic boost, but they also had different expectations and needs than domestic travelers. Language barriers, cultural differences, and unfamiliarity with American driving customs sometimes created problems. Some communities struggled to accommodate the needs of international visitors while preserving the authentic American character that attracted them in the first place. The digital age also enabled new forms of Route 66 commercialization. Online retailers sold Route 66 merchandise to customers around the world. Virtual reality experiences allowed people to drive Route 66 without leaving their homes. Mobile apps provided augmented reality overlays that showed users what historic Route 66 locations looked like in their heyday. These digital innovations raised new questions about the nature of the Route 66 experience. Was a virtual road trip a legitimate way to experience the highway? Did online communities of Route 66 enthusiasts preserve the highway's social aspects? Or were they a poor substitute for the face-to-face interactions that had characterized the original highway culture? As Route 66 entered the 21st century, it faced the challenge of remaining relevant and authentic in an increasingly digital and globalized world.